Good morning and welcome to the Pleasure for Health podcast. My name is Ilse and we are nearing the end of 2023. And I thought, as part of our looking forward and backwards, that we might look at the concept of desire today. Desire being what we desire for ourselves, desire being something that leads us towards working for a goal. There's so much tied up in desire that I just wanted to actually do a whole episode on this concept. So settle in and let's discuss the idea of desire and how we can use this almost as a spiritual path, if you will, of finding out who we are and finding out how to um, come closer to our true self. So I was really recently doing some reading, and many great philosophers have wrestled with this concept of desire, but we still haven't really figured out what it is as human beings, which I think is interesting because it's one of those words that we all use, but we're not quite sure what it always means. So I'm probably not going to answer what all the sages have wrestled with over the centuries either, but I think it's worth pondering. What is desire? Is it just a sexual desire? Is it something that we really want? And what does that mean? What is a desire versus a need, let's say? So according to Jung, Carl Jung, in the Red Book, which was published just in the last couple of decades, um, Jung described people looking for the soul in desire. So he paired up this idea that desire helps us find our way to being soulful or finding our soul. Um, so we could find our soul in desire itself, but not in the objects of that desire. I think that's really profound, that we could actually use desire itself as a way to connect with our soul. When I work with clients, I often ask them, what is the intention of your heart? What is your desire? What is something that makes you feel drawn to work, drawn to do something, drawn to action? And often this is desire, and it's desiring to move towards something that is our soul. But the object that we desire, so let's say we desire a partner, we desire money, we desire a better house, we desire a good relationship, we desire to go back to school, whatever your desire is, it's not about the actual thing that you're desiring. It's about the fact that you have desire at all. And I know that's kind of weird to wrap your head around, but when I look at people these days and I notice that the light has just gone out of their eyes, people that have given up hope, that just look dead. They've lost this desire. There is no desire there. They just are kind of automatons. They're robots going through the actions of life, but not having any soul, not having any gleam. Like, I don't know what you spark. We call it lots of things, but it's hard to put it into words. So it's this idea that we have a desire, that we have many desires, that we can be in touch with, that is how we begin to touch our soul. And so it's not in the object that is the outcome, that we're really wanting. It's the fact that we have something to light the fire inside of us. We've been studying the tarot here at our Celtic Hearth over the last year, and the wands suit in the tarot is kind of speaks to this spark, speaks to this flame. What is it that lights a fire in you that you are wanting to move forward with? So I think that's, I just find that profound. And the fulfillment of our desire is never really as interesting as the desire itself. Sometimes it's, many poets write about love in this way, right? The sweetness and the poignancy of being in love is the being in love, not the actual fact that you get the object of your desire. So I think it's really interesting that it's about the desire itself. So this desire motivates us to get up and work, to play, to quest for something, this desire to go off on a quest. There's action that's called forth that otherwise we would just become passive, that we're boring and passive. And there's also a danger in following our desire, as it can just as easily lead us outwardly to more and more external gratification. So it's this complex master or mistress, whatever gender, both, all genders you want to put on this. It's a very complex thing because it leads us outwardly, but it's in touch with something inwardly, and so there's this really interesting interplay there. And one of my clients actually said this really beautifully recently. She wrote an email, and said there's an importance of creating safety within ourselves for our own needs and desires to be expressed from a place of grounded genuineness. So we, create safety so that within ourselves we can find this place of desire and express this desire from this place inside of ourselves. So it's the finding of the place and then having the not only the safety, I think, but the ego strength to really express our desire and then, have that come forth is really the answer to that. And from this grounded, genuine place, I think that's talking about our soul. So when we create this place, our soul place, from there, our desire can lead us out into the world. And there is actually a path called the path of attainment. It's one of the Sufi paths to spiritual enlightenment, I guess you would say, that deals with this, that you move outwards towards, you try to attain something. It doesn't actually matter what. You could want to attain, you could say, well, I want to have a new computer, and this is your path of attainment. And you put everything you have into working towards getting a new computer. This is a spiritual endeavor. You have a desire, you move towards it. Once you get that thing, you most likely realize that you want another thing, or that the computer in and of itself is not the end of your quest. You have another thing that you want to go for. And so then you say, well, I want to have like a car. So you work and work towards having a car, you get your car, and then you're like, well, this is not it either. And you keep working towards this. So it's a spiritual path towards eventually, theoretically, I haven't actually tried this over my lifetime too much, but the theory holds true in my mind, is that theoretically you get to a place where you come to desire God or spirit or self or soul or the universe or whatever name you want to put on that divine spark. You come to actually desire that unity or union or all of those terms. And so after having worked on smaller desires over the years, like let's say you yearned and desired a computer and you got it, you yearned and desired for your car, you got it. Now when you yearn and desire for union with God or whatever that is, you have built this neural pathways really on how to attain these things. And so you work towards that. And that might look like praying every day or meditating or going for walks in nature or, thinking about every action you take, that is it in alignment with my highest good and everyone else's highest good, like however that looks for you. You would have some patterns set up that you would know how to attain, and you would eventually attain union with God or however that looks. So it's interesting that this desire can lead us to inner or outer attainment, both. I think it's important to go out into the world and to follow our desire, but not to get so entranced by the external world that we end up chasing the fulfillment of our perceived desires and, potentially getting stuck in those. I think this is where I actually was curious about this concept of chasing desire or questing to fulfill our desire, because I think it's important to do that. But then again, if we think that it's the object that's out there that is what the answer is, then we're not actually kind of getting it. And it's having a desire at all that calls us to do that. And I suppose in some ways, having a desire that is in our own and everyone else's highest good would be important to come to this place of groundedness with, because potentially we could desire something that would hurt or harm someone else, and fulfilling that desire would not lead towards any sort of spiritual attainment. It would lead towards destruction and evil in the world, which I do think happens. So it's this interesting, it's this interesting mix. And so if our desire rules us, we're not in control of that. We're not in any kind of enlightened state. If we have a desire, but we understand how to put that desire towards our own self, towards the best attainment for everyone, then that can work for us. So we don't want to get blinded by it. We don't want to get possessed. In Jung's Red Book, again, he said, if he possessed his desire and his desire did not possess him, he would lay a hand on his soul. So when it becomes like a fetish and you just can't, or an addiction, you can't do anything else but go for the thing, that is not mastery of desire, if you will. And so many enlightened beings have talked about mastering desire. And this is why I think, many spiritual traditions have this giving up of worldly pleasures or giving up of things, because it is such a difficult path to follow, this path of desire. But if you don't have any desire at all, you end up not living, really. So it's this really interesting interplay. What I found interesting for people on healing is to help people become aware of their desires and to welcome them as friends and guides in their lives, but to caution against too quickly satiating themselves on the objects of their desires. So sometimes it helps to sit with our desire and let it work within us, so that we get profoundly intimate with our desire before we just go out and fulfill it. And I think this also, speaks to people that are very wealthy and can just potentially have every whim and desire fulfilled immediately, doesn't let them sit with the desire. I actually feel that if we had a desire and we sat with it for a while, it would either pass on by because it wasn't worthy of our action, or it would grow and fan potentially our inspired action. But I think having it fulfilled too quickly doesn't serve us either. So if you are just going to fulfill whatever whim comes into your head, I wouldn't call that desire. I would call that, just following every whim. And that potentially could just lead you all over the place in confusion, which we see quite often as well. So when we have our desires fulfilled too quickly, or one without enough of our own sweat and tears, we somehow don't get the fruits of our labor in the same way. I think this is what potentially Jung and some others describe as waiting in the desert, or going out into the desert, or even potentially the dark night of the soul. But as you go out into the desert, you're going into a emptiness so that you can become really intimate with your desire. And from that place, I think that grounded genuineness that my client was talking about is potentially that desert, that place that we're sitting with our desire and seeing if it's working within us in a way that's making us a better person, and not just leading us down the path towards hell, if you will. Back in Jung's time, potentially it would take you the other direction, which I think is all too common, actually. There's, whether you believe in hell and heaven as literal places or just metaphorical spaces, I think it's something to consider. So many healers of modern times waste precious energy providing a taste of fulfillment without fully allowing each person to experience their desire. I think this is where I have discussed with my colleagues in the intimacy space of body work, or in potentially using pleasure as a healing tool, which is kind of what I tend to find helpful for many of us. It can also be a red herring in a way. It takes us down that idea of just giving people a taste of their desires and working with that, but not actually allowing each person to experience that and have it grow inside them and to come to any kind of action with that. So, this is a time to caution ourselves and to allow our clients to grapple with their own souls. We are there as guides, but not just to grant wishes. So we want to make sure people are coming from this grounded, centered place, and ourselves as well, so that we're not acting out of this kind of whim. I'm just going to go for anything that comes into my head. So I believe there is a need for guides and healers and shamans, or whatever word you want to put on this, people that have grappled in the desert with their own desires and with their own pathways, their own souls. And it's such a tricky place. It's such a tricky place to be, because we're not wanting to take other people's energy or take their gold, if you will. We want to be there in order to allow someone to come to see their own gold, their own desires, their own actions in the world, and how that can create this soul connection to, whether it's to a partner, whether it's to themselves, whether it's to nature, to the planet, to help someone to realize this place of genuineness from which they can reach out with, this desire and this love and this compassion. So again, he whose desire turns away from outer things reaches the place of the soul. If he does not find the soul, the horror of emptiness will overcome him, and a fear will drive him with a whip, lashing time and again in a desperate endeavor and a blind desire for the hollow things of the world. He becomes a fool through his endless desire and forgets the way of his soul, never to find her again. And that's from Jung. So there's some really profound wisdom there that Jung came to in that period of his life when the Red Book was written. So if we take this, that desire is a connection to soul, from soul to the outward world, then we come to understand that, the idea of this rainbow bridge, this kind of connection that we as individuals have with the whole, could come from this desire. So I'm really curious about working with desire and working with our soul, and how to how to bring this to an awareness, so that we bring a more, heart-centered, loving spirit to 2024 and beyond, as we move forward into the next year and next years, towards what is a really tumultuous time in our history. So I do think that this is, as an individual, this is something we can work on. And this is something that we may want to engage a guide, someone who can walk with us, in this terrain of desert or dark night of the soul, or however you look at it, that has faced their own desires and faced some of their demons and is able to hold space for us to do that. So in that vein, that is what I'm attempting to do in my work, and I hope that others listening will maybe be inspired to have a look at this journey as well. So thank you so much for joining me for this interesting introspective study. As you can probably think, I got some of the material, or was inspired, my soul was inspired by reading a little bit of the Carl Jung's Red Book. So you can find some of that there. And I hope you'll maybe chime in or come and, join me for the next episode. I'm always picking interesting topics, loosely relating to relationship and relationship to everything, ourselves, other people, the universe, nature. So if you have a topic you'd like me to talk about, please do send it in. And thanks so much for listening. I love that we can take the time to do this with each other. So you can find out more about me on my website, pleasureforhealth.com. That's a good place to start. And do sign up for my blog, and you can take a look at my other podcast episodes there as well. Thanks so much for joining me, and have a wonderful end of 2023.